Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Agilution Diaries. My name is Saman, and today I have a guest, Dana Eason, back with us. We got an interesting topic that we're going to talk about, and we're going to discuss what is Agile and really just try to clarify some of the misconceptions around Agile. I think most of us probably know what Agile is, but there's some unique nuances. And this topic is actually it's kind of interesting because we were doing a lunch and learn within our company for a group of us that are new to Agile and want to bring some of those practices and techniques to the different services that we offer. And during this session, we were talking about what is Agile. We were discussing some of the fundamentals, values, principles, and things like that. And one of the participants actually chimed in with a really good observation, and that's what sparked the idea for today's topic. And they had some positive feedback for us. And one of the feedback was um, just basically talking about how, they felt like it was really helpful and valuable to get on the same page about what is Agile and to just establish and have that common understanding and language about what Agile is. Because so often within the projects that they're working on or within their context, one of the challenges that comes up is people just have a completely different understanding of what Agile is. Um, and they focus on sometimes the wrong things and thinking that that is what Agile is. And so they miss a lot of the benefits. And so we thought, probably a good topic is let's talk about that. Let's talk about what it is, some of the misconceptions around it, and also why it's important to what is it? Is it like daily stand-ups? Is it backlogs? Is it scrum masters? Is it a methodology, or is it a mindset? And then another thing we're going to talk about is the benefits of focusing on the Agile principles and values, which I kind of gave the answer a little bit, away. But Dana, welcome.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, right off the bat, what do you think about that? And what did you think about that comment that we received in the lunch and learn? And what comes to mind when you think about Agile? And
Yeah, no,
uh,
I think, and thank you for having me on. I think that it was a fantastic question. I personally wasn't there for the lunch and learn, but whenever you all told me about, the feedback that was given, I thought that that was the most important question from, folks that don't know or have a lot of information about Agile, right? Like, what is it? I hear it's a methodology. I hear it's about process. And from our perspective, it's definitely about those values and principles, right? Because you have to look at um, what are those fundamental things? What are we trying to get to before we even look at a process, right?
mhm.
Before we even start to problem solve or anything. Like we all need to get in the same mind frame and mindset about how to go about solving that problem. So I think that yeah, I think that that question was very poignant and such a good topic to talk about today for sure.
Yeah, and I think so because I don't know if you probably have a lot of stories. I have a lot of stories as well where we're doing some work, we're you're in a project and you're in a meeting, and someone comes in and you're actually working with your team, and the team is applying a lot of the Agile principles and different frameworks that fall under the Agile umbrella. And someone will come into a meeting and say, hey guys, like we need to shift gears, switch gears, and we got some urgent issues, and this is the issue. And
Mhm.
the team will listen, and be kind of respectful of even though perhaps that's not the right meeting or the right discussion to bring it in. And someone will say, yeah, that's great, let's get it in our backlog, or let's and they'll throw a term around it. And the person that's coming in with the problem will sometimes say, what do you mean, like get in the backlog? What does that mean? Like we need to respond to this quickly, and isn't that what Agile is all is being Agile? We need to be agile. We need to respond and do this, and it's like, yeah, that's definitely part of it, but there's some So stuff like that comes up where people have a misunderstanding or a misconception around it. Or you have a lot of situations where it's like, yeah, we're doing agile. Yeah, we've got scrum masters, we've got a product owner, we've got this backlog, and it's like, well, yeah, those are things that fall under the umbrella of agile, but that's not really agile, right? It's a
Right.
lot. It's much more than that, and and you talked about that, and it's actually a set of values and principles
Right, right.
defined
I
by the
think of
Agile
it too
Manifesto.
as, we always talk about the sports thing, right? Because you and I are, I like football, you like basketball. And when I think about football, of course, I think about Alabama football, right? Um, but when I
That's
think about football and you're thinking about them making a play and your opponent has just, scored and you have to regroup in that moment with your team, there's a set of values and principles that that team has that they are going into that play with, that next play with, right? So they're going to talk about it, right? So let's say in this instance, you're talking about someone coming in with an urgent issue that needs to be solved immediately.
hmm
First, we need to discuss it as a team, right? And that's around those principles of, people over processes. So get those people together, right? Get those people together, start discussing it, start looking at what is it that's going to be like the least path to resistance that we can, solve this immediately without throwing off everything else. But that takes a conversation. And I think that when people think, oh, people over processes or individuals over, when they're looking at the manifesto, they're thinking about it kind of subjectively and not objectively. And you have
hmm
to look at it in those different situations. Like, what is the situation entail? What do we need to do if we're having a problem, right? So, and I kind of want to take it back to another story as well. Like whenever I first got my certification as a Scrum Master, I learned about Scrum, right? So it's
Yes,
all
there
about
you go.
like of course we talked about the manifesto, of course we talked about agile principles, but at that time I thought agile was Scrum, period. I
hmm
was like, I'm going to be the best Scrum Master, this is what agile is, it's scrum. And
Right.
when I went for my next certification, it was an advanced certification, and the instructor was like, scrum is not agile, right? And I'm like, what is she talking about? What does she mean scrum is not
What
agile,
do you mean
right?
is agile? Yeah.
He's like, it's a framework of
hmm
agile, right? So then she started going through the manifesto and the principles, and I'm like, ah, got it, right?
Right. Right.
I have to understand agile first because it's a mindset. It's a set of beliefs about how you go about solving a problem. It's not just Scrum, right? Scrum is a framework of how you can apply those values and principles, just like the other agile frameworks that we have. So that's the thing that allowed it to click for me, was when I had to take a step back in that course and really think about like, what is this manifesto saying? What are these principles saying? Do I believe that, right? In my heart of hearts, do I believe that I can help my teams um, kind of understand and embody these values as well? So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, I love that story. And I think it's a good, I love the story. And I think it's a good story because most people, and that's exactly where my mind was going
mhm,
when we were talking about what is, misconceptions around what agile is. Most people are thinking and talking about when agile comes up, they're actually quite often thinking about and talking about the various agile frameworks
exactly,
when
exactly.
they talk about agile, because that's what they've been taught, right? They've been taught that a framework, perfect example is scrum, is agile, and that's really all they need to learn. And once they learn that, they'll be agile and they can apply that. And they don't realize that agile is actually not scrum or
Mhm,
kanban, or it's actually a set of principles and values which we can apply to various processes or frameworks, and And our interpretation, and I think you said it really well, is it's not a process, it's not a methodology for delivering projects or for producing products or for production sake, but it's a mindset, and a set of principles about, and this is my definition of it, for how we can work together and how
Exactly.
we can think and how we can be high performing as a team. And I think that's
Exactly.
a really important point to understand and realize. But I'd love to get your thoughts about like why it's so important to take a pause, take a moment, and actually focus on the principles and values rather than the process stuff that we always think about. Like, oh, we just need a backlog, we need sprints, we need got to get your scrum master, got to get that. And like those things are important, but why is it important to focus on the values and principles, in your
Yeah,
opinion?
from my perspective, it's easy to get caught up in the doing, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of people think if you do, then it's going to solve the problem. But if you're not thinking as you're doing, if you're just going through the motions of having your daily scrums, of having your backlog refinement sessions without thinking about you know is this satisfying our customer, like is this the top priority item for our customer, are we delivering frequently? If you're not thinking about these principles as you're going through these meetings, you're not hitting the target, right? So you can do it all
Yeah.
day. You can go through those motions all day, but if you're not looking at what you're trying to produce and actually get out of doing those actual team ceremonies and things of that nature, you're not getting the best benefit, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. And I think that kind of comes back to you don't know the why behind what you're doing.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And I think, it's important to understand. And that's the thing. People most of the time just learn the process and then some of the methods that are explained by the practices, I should say, that are explained by the frameworks. And, and there's a big difference between sometimes what that stuff is. And I think the challenge comes is those frameworks like Scrum and Kanban, they're not it's impossible for them to account for all of the different scenarios and
Right.
situations you're going to encounter
Right.
within your environment and project. It's impossible. There's nothing is ever going to be comprehensive enough to account for every type of situation that could come up. And
Right.
so what do you do in those situations that there really isn't a good you know um, recommendation or guideline from Scrum? And so that's where your principles and values of Agile come into play, in my opinion. And you can kind of fall back on that because in the end, it's those are the belief systems that have resulted in a lot of these frameworks that we have, and they can always refer back to that and say, "Oh, okay, yeah," and figure out how to navigate those situations when you go back and fall back on your values and principles. And I think we have some comments. I see Meg has a comment. Meg, great, thank you for posting. Great to see you this morning too. Yeah, and Meg was part of the lunch and learn. And one of the things that somebody brought up is there's a big difference between doing agile and being agile. And I think that
Right.
speaks to what you were saying, Dana. Is being agile is in my opinion is when you actually exemplify those values and principles.
Right. And
Um,
I think a big misconception too is whenever we have like an agile transformation, for instance, most folks think that if they have a similar problem as another client that you've done, that you can do the exact same thing that you've done
yeah.
for that previous client for them
Mhm.
and it's going to work, right?
Right.
But
Right.
we know, like you were just saying, it's going to be unique. Like everybody's problems are going to be unique, and we can give you the tools and techniques from a process perspective, but as we go and dig deeper into whatever that problem is, then we'll find out what needs to kind of change for your company based on those values and principles, right? The agile values and principles. It's not
Yeah.
going to look one way for everybody. It's going to be individual.
Right.
So I think that's a big misconception as well, is that everybody thinks that their transformation is going to look like someone else's. And it's
Right. And what helps you to come up with, I think, good ways to customize your approach is when you lean on the values and principles.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, I think it's also helpful to just talk about what is it? What is it? When we say values and principles, what do we mean by that? And we didn't really talk about that on the lunch and learn, but I think, as you were saying that, I think that was another thing that kind of popped up in my head is
Mhm.
the values. We have, the four values, and then we have the 12 principles from as part of the Agile Manifesto. It's really, and it has really nothing to do. I mean, you don't even need to talk about Agile. I think it's just it's no different than kind of the rules that and guidelines and values, principles that we use growing up, right?
Rules of
Um,
engagement.
what's that?
I said rules of engagement.
Rules of engagement. Yeah. And so when I think about values, I think it's, and I look at the values that are, described by the Agile Manifesto and, kind of defined by that group. It really describes behaviors and patterns that we know are good,
Right.
and that we know are exemplified by high performing teams or units, whether it's a sports team, in the military or in business. The values and what the Agile values and principles provide is they describe these behavior patterns that have been exhibited by really high performing and successful teams and units.
Mhm.
And so to me, that's what the definition of good is, and it kind of can serve as a north star for high performance and being
Right.
good at, teaming and collaborating and getting work done more effectively and efficiently. And they tell us the why behind what behaviors are good and which behaviors are not good. And then I think the principles that follow the values are just ways to help us to stay true to those values. And I
Right.
think they kind of describe how, how we can actually achieve those values and stay true to them and stay close to them. And that's what's described by the principles. And then I feel like the frameworks like Scrum and Kanban, they provide some more practices of, okay, well, this is how you can actually uh, bring these principles and make it routine within your day to day. And this is how you
Exactly.
can actually implement it in action and make it part of your kind of, daily and weekly, monthly routine activities.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know if that kind of what your thoughts are on that when you think about values. And I think, I don't know, it really doesn't have. You can even apply this outside of Agile. I mean, I think it's just guidelines that tell us what's good and what's not good, and it's based on patterns that we've seen, right, of
Right,
what's
right. And
successful.
yeah, at the end of the day, for me, it all comes back to beliefs, right? And when you talk about values, it's around, you know, yes, about being good and being, doing well at your job, but there's an innate thing in all of us that we have as far as values. There are family values, there are religious values, there are all these values that make up our kind of countenance when we're around others. It makes up our problem solving skills, right? So how we talk to each other, how we interact with one another. And I look at Agile as being a way of showing how to interact and what we value when it comes to problem solving for different, if whether it be technology, whether it be operations. It's just a set mind or a mindset that every individual on that team embodies and encompasses within themselves to solve problems together. That's how I truly look at Agile. It's just getting on the same page. We have the same belief, we have the same goal, and we're going in that direction together using these values and principles.
Yeah, and I love that definition you just provided. I think that's a fantastic way to put it. Um, there's set of values that, and I think the as part of that is they're values that we've all seen or experienced when we've been part of teams that are like really firing on all cylinders, high performing.
Right,
Whether it's part of a sports team, whether
right.
you're in the military or wherever, right? And what's
It's that
great is
flow.
someone has. What's that?
I said it's that flow,
It's that
right?
flow, yeah.
You wanna get into that flow.
Get into that flow, and what's great is a group has taken the time to extrapolate those patterns and those behaviors and put them in what we call Agile Manifesto and a set of values and said, hey, look, these are the behaviors, patterns, and beliefs that we've seen, we've experienced in high performing teams.
Exactly.
And if we embody these and we really, integrate them in our day to day, in our belief system, in our mindset, we can become high performing, highly collaborative. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, that's great. I think, this is fantastic. What I love to do, and maybe, this can be for our next episode, is actually dive into some of those values and principles
Oh, for sure.
and then maybe dissect some of them. And I like to certainly do that once in a while too. It's a great refresher for me.
Mhm.
Because it has, you don't need to necessarily just apply to doing software development, product delivery. You can apply this to anything. These values are basically, you want to build high performing teams, you want flow, you want get things to, done well, you want high engagement, like these, here you go, these are the values and principles, like you can use them in any situation. So
Right.
yeah, that's great. Anything else, Dana, that comes to mind? Anything that you wanted to add before we wrap it up for the day, and we'll talk about what's next?
No, I don't think so. I'm all set.
Okay,
Thanks.
great. Well, thanks, guys, for those of you tuning in. Thank you for the questions. We're just starting to open this topic up. We're going to dive into some of the values and principles and subsequent topics. We'd love to hear from you as well. And we'll post this on LinkedIn, obviously, and open up the discussion. But if, what's your definition of Agile? Why do you think it's important to pause and focus on the values and principles? We'd love to get your thoughts on it. And then let's get the conversation going. All right. Thanks. I hope everyone has a great week. It's another episode of Agolution Diaries, and looking forward to seeing everybody again in a couple weeks.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks.